Hey, welcome back everybody. In the last couple of videos we installed Android Studio and got it all set up, and we made a simple layout. In this video we're going to do a little bit of coding with Kotlin, so let's get started. So I have Android Studio opened up. I'm going to select start a new Android Studio project, and we'll call this first game app. It'll be a little game. You could put test.com if you don't have a domain, and just save. The default's probably fine. Make sure you check include Kotlin support. This is in Android Studio 3.0, so it should be checked by default. So I'm going to hit next, and all this is good. I'm going to hit next again, and in this page on this screen I'm going to go ahead and select basic activity. It just adds a little activity, and an activity is called a screen. So every screen in Android is called an activity. So here is our little floating action button that'll work. So just basic activity, next, and then finish, and this will get set up, and this is fine for our needs. And we'll code a little bit of a Kotlin as soon as this loads. So just give it a second and this will open up. So I want to build a little app where if you press a button, then it changes some text. It's a little bit, I'm probably not explaining it very well, but you'll see. This will be kind of a short video, so you'll see what we can do. But we are going to write a little bit of Kotlin, which is now officially supported by Google. It's a very good language. I love it. If you look at previous videos on YouTube, a lot of them use Java. This one we're going to do exclusively in Kotlin. So every day for however long I can keep this up, I'll be making new videos with Kotlin. Okay, cool. So I'm going to go ahead, and this is kind of what we did in the last couple of videos. We set this up, so I'm going to go ahead and click the Run button. And in a previous video, we set up an Android virtual device, or I showed you how to do it. So if you have a physical device, you can select it there, but I don't have a phone plugged in right now. My Pixel isn't plugged in. So I'm going to go ahead and select a virtual device, so available virtual devices. And if you don't have one, you can do what I did in the previous video, which is set it up there and run through these steps. Okay, cool. So I'm going to assume you have an emulator, and I'm going to go ahead and click on here's our Android, our virtual emulator, and in a couple of seconds this will pull up and we can see it. So you can see in the background Gradle build is running, and then it'll say installing APK. APK is kind of the file format for so installing APK, and there it is. And here's our screen. So cool. So I know if you notice from the default, what Android sets up for you is every time you press this floating action button, it pops up a snack bar. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a picture up here in the top, and every time you click it, it changes the text there from hello world to hello world again, or something like that. So let's get started. Okay, so when you first open up Android Studio, you have these two files open up, content main.xml, which is what we've been using, but we also have mainActivity.kt. This is Kotlin code. So everything you see here is all in Kotlin. And this is probably going to be very confusing, but I'll break it down in the next couple of videos and try to help you understand it. So if you don't have these open, or if it's just blank like that, what you can do, come over here to the left and select project, make sure at Android view and click app Java. Even though it's Kotlin, it's in the Java folder. And then double click the first, so these three folders there, click the first one, and then here's our main activity.kotlin. So here, and we can open up main activity. Okay, so this is the default code. So a lot of this code we don't really need. So let's try to clean this up and get rid of as much code as we can. So I'm going to select this right there, and I'm going to select all of that code and just delete it. And also this code here, and I'm just going to delete it. So what you should be left with is, and you'll see it's kind of hidden up here, but there's some imports. I'm going to go ahead and close that. But you have your package, you have your imports, then you have your class, and then you have these lines of code. So all the code that we just deleted, so all of that right there, just get rid of that. And really important, you're going to need two closing brackets. So make sure you have two closing brackets. So it should look pretty much exactly like this on your screen now. Okay, so let's go back to our resources, and we're going to open up the layout, and then let's open up content main. And you can see here it says hello world. And what's really important is that we can give it an ID. So if you come over to the right, and you'll notice you may need to open up attributes there like we've talked about in a previous video, but select the text, select hello world, in content main, select attributes, and then you may need to use this button to see them, but it says ID there. So let's call this our message, and I'm going to hit enter. And behind the scenes, what Android is doing is it's going to say, hey, behind the scenes, this hello world says, or its ID is our message. So if I go to the bottom here and I switch from design mode to text mode, we can see, yeah, we have a new text view and the ID here is our message. So this is very confusing, but you don't need to really understand this, at least not right now, because we can do it all in the design mode. So the important thing is we gave it an ID, our message. So let's go back to mainActivity.kotlin.kt, and so let's do one more thing. Let's go open up activity main. It's going to be inside of layouts just next to content main, but activity main. And we can see here we have a floating action button. That's what that button is called. And this has an idea of fab. So we can name this to whatever we want. We can call this floating button. We can call it whatever we want. So I'm going to go ahead and call it floating button. So here's the really important part. Let's go back to main activity, and again it's an app, Java, and then main activity. And let's do this. Let's do this. So come down, see where it says on create. So right after it says set support content, set support action bar, make a couple of lines, and let's do this. Let's do floating, and we can see as soon as we start typing it, it prompts us for it, and see it, and we can make this larger and smaller. I made mine a lot larger. Yours might be kind of small, but you can kind of see that it has floating action button for us, and that's really nice. So I'm going to double click on that, and the reason it knows that is because back in our activity main, when we select that, we have an ID of floating action button. So this is kind of our layout, but what powers it behind the scenes is Kotlin, or Java in some cases. So we have that. Now I'm going to put a dot, and then I'm going to start typing text. So text equals, actually let's do this. So let's do this. Dot set on click listener. And what this says is hey, every time we press the floating action button, and remember, every time we press this floating action button with an ID of floating button, we're gonna do something. So dot set on click listener, and you have a couple of options here. If you need to make yours bigger where you can see more of it, you can like pull that out. But what we want right here is this right here. And if you don't have this, you can easily just type it up. So instead of, you can just type listener and put brackets like that. Oh, we don't want that. Okay, cool. So if you go ahead and run this, this should run, but we actually haven't done anything with it. So if you notice, we can do floating button. Every time we click on it, it's going to do something, but right now it doesn't do anything. So what's going to happen here? So it says, hey, this floating action button, every time you click on it, do whatever is between that and that. So we can type tons of code here. So all this code will be executed every time you click on it. Every time you click on the floating action button. But you can't just put in any text. You have to write valid Kotlin code. So let's do this. Let's do, just to test things out, let's do this. Let's do D. We'll do this Daniel Malone press. Okay, cool. So every time we click on the floating action button, we're going to do this. We're going to do that right there. So what exactly does this do? Well, let's run it and find out. So I'm going to save it. I'm going to run it with the button right up there. I'm going to go back to my emulator, and in a couple of seconds this should run. And now we can see, hey, we can press the button, but it still doesn't do anything. We want to change the message there. So what does this D do right here? Well, you'll notice if you come down to the bottom of Android Studio and you click on Logcat, you'll see a bunch of random code that you have no idea what it does. You might have hundreds of these lines. And so you just select your emulator and your app, which should already be selected by default. And we can see here it says, hey, Daniel Malone pressed. So that's the exact message that we got right here. So we can actually search. All of this is kind of like the logs for Android. So let's search for Daniel Malone, and you can see, hey, yeah, there it is. It's pressed. So every time we press the button inside of the Logcat, it's going to display this for us. And we must have pressed that button 3 times because it says 3 times, because it's printed 1, 2, 3 there. Okay. So go back to the emulator, and every time I press this button, see how it's adding a new Daniel Malone pressed there? So every time I press it, it just adds a new one. So we kind of have it set up, but it's not quite set up all the way. So let's keep working on this. Let's change hello world to hello everyone, or hello Android. Okay, cool. So one of the things we can do, go back to content main, which is available inside of the layouts, content main, and I'm going to go ahead and click on the Logcat to close that out. But if we click on hello world, we can see it has ID of our message. I forget if I put that in or not, but we can call it custom, or we'll call this welcome message. Enter, and that'll save it. Okay, cool. Now let's go back into our main activity.kotlin and let's do this. So inside of the floating action button, inside every time it's pressed, do the code between that and that. Let's do something else. We can add lots of code here. So what do we call it again? We called it welcome message. So start typing welcome message, and here it is. It automatically prompts you for it. So I'm going to hit enter, and then I'm going to put .text equals, and then what are we going to say? We're going to say, let's say welcome Android. If I can type here, Android. Okay, cool. I'm going to save that, go back up to our run button, and go back to the emulator, and let's see what happens now. So just wait a couple of seconds for this to show up, and every time, let's see if this works. Yes, it does. So every time we press this button, it's going to set it to welcome Android. Now, every time we do that, so I'm pressing it lots of times, but it doesn't change. It's because it's already at welcome Android, so it's just changing it to the same thing again. But if we come down to the Logcat, and remember, select your app and select your device and your app, which should be selected by default. What we do is search for Daniel Malone or whatever. Search for whatever you put in the D log. That's just for debugging. That's not really code that we're going to use. So whenever you ship your app and give it to, and whenever you publish it to Google Play, just remove that because we don't want it there anymore. I'll get into that in a future video. But we can see, hey, every time we press the button, if I go back to the emulator, every time we press it, we're getting a new log there. So Daniel Malone pressed. So I can just click this many, many times. So that's basically this video. Again, to sum it up, go into your layout folder, or go into your layouts, and you select something, and you give it an ID, and we can use that ID in main activity.kotlin, which is over here. And we can say, hey, floating action button dot set on click listener. Every time you click on that button, do that code. And we could have lots of code in here. We can do lots of stuff. We could set it to, we could do tons of code inside of there. But we only need to do one line right here. And it's basically going to say, hey, welcome message. So again, if you go back to content main, the welcome message there, the welcome message, set its text to welcome Android. And there's lots of stuff we can do with this. We can do welcome, let's do dot, and then if you just put a dot there, you can see there's lots of stuff we can set. I'm not going to go over all of this, but you can do all kinds of stuff. You can do on set lines, you can set color, set text color. And we can put in a custom color. I think it's like r.color. Will this work? No, I need something else. We'll get into that later. But the main point is you can do lots of stuff here. So hopefully you learned something. I'm going to go ahead and stop the video, but in the next tomorrow, or maybe today even, when I make the next video, we'll do even more with this. We'll get rid of that, we'll make it more advanced, we'll change pictures out, we'll make it more complex where you click on different things and it changes different text. Actually, we can do a little bit of that right now. So let's go back into content main. Let's search, and if you go to, I'm in design mode, and again, you get to content main there. I'm going to get a button, and I'm going to drag it onto the screen. So let's put it in the top left, and I'm just going to put it there. And I'm going to constrain it. We did a little bit of this in the last video, but I'm going to just go to text view just a second here. Okay, let's do this. Let's get that, and let's drag it to the left, and drag this to the top, and let's go back to text mode. And it's giving us an Okay, it's all good. Okay, cool. Actually, let's also drag it to the right side, so it's kind of centered there. Okay, cool. So let's do this. I'm going to select that button. Let's give this button. We'll call this top button. Okay, cool. So now let's go back to our Kotlin file, and after this floating action button, let's create some more lines. Let's do this. Let's do top button dot set on click listener. Okay, and then again we want to select that right there, or if you want, you can just type it out like that. Okay, cool. Now if we click on the floating action button, we're going to do that right there. But if we click on the top button, we're going to do whatever's inside of here. So let's change the welcome message. Let's do this. Welcome. Let's do welcome message dot text equals you pressed the top button. Okay, cool. So let's go ahead and run our app and see what happens. And let's see if this works. So give it a second, and here we are. So it says hello world there. So now I'm going to press the pink floating action button, and it says welcome to Android. Now I'm going to press the top button, and let's see what happens. It says you press the top button. So you can have lots of these buttons for different things. So you press that, it goes welcome Android. You press this, it goes you press the top button. So you can have lots of, you can get really creative with this and create lots of stuff and create lots of buttons. So you'd create a lot of buttons. So drag in different buttons and place them different places. Again, you got to constrain them. So you kind of like, just make it, go like that. And we want that to be to the bottom of that. And so we can kind of play around with it. But the important thing to know is select a button, give it an ID. So ASDF. And then if we go back to content, we can do this. Oops, I messed something up. We can do ASDF dot set on click listener, and you can put your stuff here. So log, you could do it. You could put a debug log here. So Dan, I will do this. ASDF test. We're here, and so you can get really creative, and you can do lots of different stuff. Probably a lot of your time in Android will be working with set on click listeners, because that's kind of popular whenever you press something. And it's so anyway, I'm going to go ahead and stop the video, but in the next video we'll continue where we left off. We'll do even more with Kotlin. And if you had any trouble with anything in this video, leave a comment in the YouTube video below, and I will respond to you. So just leave a YouTube comment and I'll get to it as soon as I can. So hopefully this worked for you, but if it doesn't, leave a comment and I'll get to you, and I'll respond to everybody. So leave a comment. Thanks.